My name is Rick Firestone.
My name is Vince Pizzelli.
My name is Ben Bugale.
When you get the three of us together, you only select the pre-approved tournament stages and you turn off all those items, you've got pixelprojectradio. We're a video game and video game club style podcast where we talk about the games that we love and the games that you love. How you guys doing?
Oh, great. It is springtime. It's nice outside. We're living the dream. The mood is infinitely better in these past couple weeks.
It is. There's a sense of hope that is, I think that's the word, hope. What is that thing again? It's rushing through me with the promise of springtime and the promise of vaccination and people hopefully thinking and practicing compassion a little bit more. So yeah, doing all right. Thanks for asking. How's Rick doing?
I'm pretty good. We were talking off mic, I should say, about, how the weather is getting really nice and it's a great time to be outside. So what better time to play video games, am I right?
Hey, listen, it's sunny outside, play video games. It's rainy outside, play video games. Tornado, video games. Hurricane, maybe no video games unless you have a backup generator. But most cases, it's one of those things where it's like, you're damned if you do, damned if you don't. You're just kind of going with the flow, doing your same thing.
Yeah, what else are you going to do? Are you going to live your life? You don't want to do that.
Come on, guys, sit in front of the screen and just play games. Anytime it would snow, I'm not going to lie, when I was little, I absolutely would sit in front of my television and play all of the snow levels of all of my favorite games. So I was that kid. So yeah, I would be playing all of the summery and spring levels right now, to be honest.
Speaking of snow levels, Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze, that's on my list. And that is a great game. A really good game that I've been sleeping on for a really long time. And that actually segues perfectly into our topic today, which is difficulty in games. And that's one of those games that I found to be like a nice little, a moderate palate cleanser, if you will. A lot of fun, snow monkey, but not too difficult.
When you say, okay, so it's not too difficult, but it's not too difficult at this, what are we talking?
So like, every time I die in that game, except for like a couple certain spots, I feel like it's warranted. Like I feel like it's justified. And because it's a platformer, snow monkey platformer, like it's not really supposed to be that deep. You're just playing Donkey Kong, collect banana, go through. There are other platformers that I would say are completely unjustified in difficulty. Let's hear your guys' thoughts on difficulty in games, what makes you want to play a game versus not want to play a game based on difficulty, things like that.
Yeah, so in case you didn't get the memo, listeners out there, based on the title, we are talking about difficulty in video games today. I thought a nice way to start this one off would just be talking about some of the most difficult games we've ever played. Ben, why don't you go first? What's like, if I ask you about the most difficult game you've ever played, what's something that comes to your mind?
A game that I never finished called Dark Souls. I got about a sneeze deep into that thing, and I just my friends back in Washington, Pennsylvania, like to watch me play scary games, and they also like to watch me flounder. And I think I finally defeated some Goliath creature. And they said, that's basically the tutorial. And I threw up in my mouth. Yep. So, Dark Souls is among the hardest games I've ever played. I'm not going to lie, Frogger as well is its own circle of hell. So those are at least two of mine. And I'm sure that other traumas will be unearthed here today. So how about you, Vince?
I think one of the most difficult games I've ever played is probably a tie between like Celeste and Super Meat Boy. I don't know if anyone's ever played Super Meat Boy, but they're both platformer style games, and Super Meat Boy is more of a pixelated platformer style game, and I mean so is Celeste really, but those games made me hate myself. It was so much of doing the same thing over and over and over again, and those are games that you do play solely for the difficulty. Like there's not really much lore to Super Meat Boy, I don't think. I'm not really sure, but yeah. It's a tie between those two. Rick, shoot your shot, bud.
Yeah, so when I think of the most difficult game that I've ever played, and this might be a cheat answer, so I've got a couple of things. The first thing that I think of is this game called Getting Over It with Bennett Foley, I think is the full title, Getting Over It. That's a game that I think it's just a genuinely bad and flawed game. I think it tries to be profound and just fails in its execution. But thinking about other games that are just excessively difficult, I think Divinity Original Sin 2 and Witcher 3 are two games where the learning curve in particular is quite steep for brand new players, especially with Divinity. And then with Witcher 3, the small amount that I've played on the hardest difficulty. We just played through that, Vince and I did, for the show. And I played on the normal difficulty, was not very challenging, especially towards the end. Then I restarted with a file on, I think, Death March is the highest difficulty, whichever is the highest difficulty. And yeah, very, very challenging. But for different reasons. And that's something that I think we'll get into, is just what exactly difficulty means. We'll get into those fundamental questions of life. Why do I exist? Why do I play video games?
I have to interject. I don't think Getting Over It is actually trying to be deep. I think it's just a giant turd burglar of a game, to be quite honest, that is making fun of profundity, but it is, there's definitely some broken elements to it, I'm not going to lie.
So I'm curious, this game Getting Over It, what's the genre? What's the impetus behind it? Like, why is it so difficult, if I may ask?
So it's a kind of game. I don't remember I think they just call them B games, but they're supposed to be unfinished. So they embrace this idea that, it might not be beatable, or it might be. It's not a full completed game. And the thing about Getting Over It is you are traversing these absurd environments of like mountains and rubbish and things like that as a man sitting in a cauldron. And the only way you get to move is by flinging yourself with a hammer.
I've seen this game.
Yeah.
I've seen lots of streamers. Like, I've seen Twitch clips of people like playing this game, and it looks like one of those games that you play on like newgrounds.com.
Yes.
Like back in the early to late 2000s, or like a mini clip game. That's what it looks like.
Uh-huh.
That's what that game looks like to me.
Yeah.
That's one of those games that I personally like would just never touch, except just to flex on other people, except to be like, I'm really good at this. Look how good I am at this. Like that. And that's like a really, that might actually bring us into our first topic, like our first like difficulty facet, which could be like playing games for their difficulty versus playing games that are just inherently difficult. And I think Ben talked about Dark Souls. Dark Souls is like probably one of the most famous games that people play only for their difficulty. I love Dark Souls. Also, because of the lore, which it kind of strikes that nice little balance in there. But do you guys have a game that you love to play specifically for its difficulty?
Rick, you go first.
I don't think I'm thinking about this. This is going to go into a couple of different tangents, I think. But to me, I don't really concern myself with the difficulty of games at this point. Totally okay with shooting down to easy if need be. Totally okay with cranking it up to the highest difficulty. I don't find myself really wanting to play games just because they are difficult. Going back to Getting Over It, I think you mentioned, Vince, like just playing it solely because it is difficult. For me, it comes down to the risk versus reward. Like, is it going to be worth the 20 to 30 hours of suffering through it just because it's difficult? For me, it's not. I've got a finite amount of time. I'm not going to play something I actively do not enjoy. Right. And it's the same thing with some difficulties. I don't fault Dark Souls for this, so I'm not going to cite them. But, folks saying like, well, you've got to play Halo on Legendary or Heroic. It's like, no, the two sides of the coin are either I don't play it or I pick my difficulty, and that might be easy. So you don't get to choose for me. That's what's going to happen. But no, I guess that's a long-winded way of saying no, I don't really play games for the sake of difficulty.
If I had to choose a game that I played because it's I wouldn't say that there's a specific game I play because it's difficult, but I would say that there are certain games that if I'm looking for something really hard to digest or chew through, I know that they'll nourish me. So Breath of the Wild on hero mode, or whatever legendary mode that is.
Hero mode, yeah.
Yeah. I'm not going to lie. There comes a point whenever you kill enough of those bokoblins, whatever you want to call them. You say bokoblin, I say bokoblin.
Tomato, tomato.
Yeah, exactly. Where, you kill enough of the silver ones, and then the gold ones start to appear, and then you've got the gold Lionels, and you use up your entire inventory trying to slay the damn thing. I seek out difficulty, but I wouldn't say that I bludgeon myself for the sake of playing a difficult game. That's not to say that I don't enjoy games that punish me.
I think it's interesting that we're all choosing games that are so vastly different. Dark Souls, Breath of the Wild, Divinity. I know Vince and I have experience with online competitive games like Rocket League and Smash. And I think that really kind of hones into this idea of what does it mean when we say a game is difficult. And if I may, before we move on the show's Instagram page and also on my Instagram page, I put out a call for folks to tell me/us the most difficult games they've ever played, and also whether or not they would ever consider playing on easy, just in general. And as far as the games that we got, it's a lot of the same that we've already talked about. A lot of Dark Souls, got a couple Cupheads. Somebody said Halo Reach, Dragon's Dogma, Dark Arisen. But I wanted to highlight two responses on the notion of playing video games on an easy difficulty. The first one, I feel like there should be an option for people to enjoy the story or the grind. And the second one, I would never, all caps, even consider playing on easy. What's even the point? So those were about as polarizing opinions as we got. And yeah, so folks, Ben is making a timeout. I agree. I have very strong feelings about this, but
I as well. And I was actually, it's funny that you say that, because I was about to, like, when we kind of interjected, I was going to say that even just among the three of us, it seems like we we kind of have divided ourselves into three sects. I would say among the three of us, based on these answers, I do play a lot of video games based on difficulty. Because sometimes I like that challenge. I would say Ben is somewhere in the middle, and I think, Rick, you kind of lie on the easier end of that spectrum, where you're... I mean, that's not like a bad thing, which is something
I would say that's inaccurate.
We're going to engage it. Well, I mean, you just said it. I don't know. Do you want to change the answer?
No. I think it when we start talking about the different kinds of difficulties, I think it'll be more clear where I lie. As you know, I'm a very complicated individual.
Well, I mean, we all are, and this is obviously not a one-sided answer, right? Like, I think that's what we're probably gonna loop around to in the end. I'm hoping.
It's too late, Vince. It's too late. We all hate each other now. No, I'm just kidding. Continue.
But let's take this conversation with these two binary opinions. The first one being, yeah, play whatever difficulty you want if you enjoy the story or the grind. Second one being, why even bother playing video games if they're not challenging? How do you... Ben has been gesticulating like crazy. Ben, what do you think?
I am going to ticulate until the cows come home. I have to answer the second one first, which was about why play games if on easy. So let me tell you about one of my favorite things about Mario Kart 8. There are settings for smaller or perhaps less talented gamers to engage and get better, such as there's an antenna you get on the back of your car that keeps yourself... It's like the bumpers. You never go off the course. But then there's also, like an automatic transmission car, there's a thing that propels your car forward, not quickly, but slowly. And that's, in my opinion, those two things together, and without steer control, whatever the motion control steering is, that makes the game easier, but it doesn't make it less fun. It doesn't make it less good. It's just... I mean, how are we supposed to make the next generation of gamers? You know what I mean? Like, sometimes you're going to have kids who are driving on the course better than you at 5 years old. Other ones are at 5 years old and aren't going to be able to play as well. And, again, to go back to Breath of the Wild, there's a graduated system. You defeat enemies of a certain color so many times, and then they they change from red to blue or blue to black. I forget the exact order.
Yeah, red to blue, blue to black, black to silver.
Black to silver, and then
silver
in
to
Heroes,
nothing. It's just silver.
That's right. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
But that's just it. There's a graduated way of doing it, and sometimes you have to go from easy to difficult. I mean, there's allowed to be a transition from Bubsy to Dark Souls. Just saying.
What's a Bubsy?
I'll just look up Bubsy sometime. It's a cute little.
Sure. I think the person that submitted that response was thinking about it in a way like if you're presented with any given difficulty,
okay,
and you get to choose, so player chosen difficulty, what is okay, what is not okay. My biggest problem with this notion that games have to be played on the hardest difficulty or not at all is that aside from being a profoundly gross form of gatekeeping, I don't think that we as consumers of art can force our perceived experience onto other artists. So just speaking about Vince, Ben and I share a love of composer Louis Vierne, and Ben was the one that turned me on to this particular composer. All Ben is able to do, or was able to do, was present me with Vierne's works. Does Ben have a particularly different experience with this composer than I do? Yeah, almost certainly, because these symphonies that Vierne wrote are for Ben's instrument, that is to say, the organ. That's not to say that I don't like Vierne. I like Vierne quite a lot. But we are not able, as consumers of art, or creators of art, depending on the experience, able to force anybody else to share that same experience. We could hope that they do. I feel that way very strongly right now as Vince and I play through Disco Elysium. I had such a positive experience with that game that I very much hope that Vince is having the same or a similar experience as me. But ultimately, we cannot do that. And that's this form of gatekeeping of forcing players either to get good or not play the game at all it stinks of that to me. Like, it has that quality of, you watched that video on an iPhone, you've never seen that movie, or, you've never seen this piece played live, guess you haven't heard it, you don't really know it. You know what I mean? Right. Like, it's this gross artistic form of gatekeeping that, like, there's a modicum of good intention at the very center, but it's just so stinky and vile, and I think gross is really the best way that I could describe it. Like, I feel so strongly, and no offense to the person, if you happen to be listening, that wrote that in. Not trying to, tell you that you're wrong, but I think you're wrong.
Well, here's the thing. If they, them and themselves, really love to play difficult games, and that's the only reason that they want to play video games, and they want to play Super Mario Brothers: The Lost Levels, more power to them, and that those games exist for those kinds of people. And
for sure,
as the genre expands vastly from year to year to year, there are games that will be released that some gamers will never even hear of. There are genres that some gamers don't even know exist. Speaking on the Nintendoizing of games, like Ben was saying before, I'm coining that term. That's my term, Nintendoizing. Nintendo creates a broad sense of difficulty within their games, and I'd like to make that its own topic, like maybe later on in this podcast, so we're going to put a little bookmark in that. But easy versus hard, like, giving the main thing that I really want to see in the space, in the community, is the acknowledgement that the game is an art form. Okay? Right? And we've talked about this before, like, games are meant to be consumed in an opinionated way. Not everyone is going to view the same experience in two different ways based on their own personal experiences. So giving the gamer the choice to say, I want to just only do story, or I really, really want to do the story, but I want the combat to be like wicked hard. You can do both of those things at the same time, and that's not really that difficult to do, especially in most genres of games that are very popular to do that in, i.e. like RPGs. Platformers are a different one. That's like, you can't really adjust that difficulty level. But if you're thinking like RPGs, FPSs, like your Halos, your CODs, you're thinking in terms of like card games. Like card games are like a big one where like you have a character and like, I don't know, for lack of a better term, let's use Gwent because that's like a card game that became popular. You have a character that's running around and there's some kind of story and the card game should be easier. You can adjust that scale based on like, I really like work my 9 to 5 all day. I'm tired as shit. I want to come home and I don't want to hate myself because I can't beat this fucking guy in Gwent. You know what I mean? And like that's where that lies. And I agree with you, Rick, in the sense that I don't think that person should be gatekeeping. I don't think that person should be kind of like putting other people down for the fact that a game has an easy setting. There's a lot of streamers like in the Twitch space where people won't watch their streams because they're playing on an easier difficulty. Doom Eternal is a big one. Like the people who like to play Doom play the game because it's a hard game. And for the gameplay and like the fast, snappy FPS, like fast-paced motion. And I think that's just simply like not a great headspace to be in. People play video games for all different types of reasons, just the same way that people consume any other type of media. And that's my opinion on the easy. Is a game worth playing because it has an easy setting?
Yeah, I just want to clear up my opinion super quick. Sorry, Ben, I don't mean to interrupt you. I don't have anything against playing games for the difficulty. You know, I think there's a lot to be said with playing something that's incredibly challenging and then loving the process of it. You know, I'm not an advocate
think that's what
of...
you were... I didn't construe that as what you were saying.
For sure. I didn't think you were. I just wanted to be on record for saying that. My biggest thing is, like, again, it comes back to, like, people like what they like, and don't yuck other people's yum, you know? Like, you know, and there's an argument, well, the developers intended it to be played this way. That's great, but as artists, we don't get to control how people consume our content or what they think of it or how they interpret it. We can just create and put it out into the world. So, yeah, Halo might be best on Heroic, and that might be what the developers thought, but at the end of the day, they don't have control over how consumers do that. So just let people play what they like and how they like to play it. Anyway, sorry, Ben. I didn't mean to cut you off.
It's fine. So I'm an omnivore. Okay, I eat both plants.
He's always bragging about being an omnivore.
I'm an
this
omnivore.
Guy.
Ben, is this like a figure? Is this some kind of symbolism, or are you mean saying that you literally mean that you just eat meat and vegetables?
Yes to both. If we include grains, I eat anything that was once, you know, at the end of the day alive. My point in saying this
Ben's
is
phone
that
number is 515-482.
I strive to be a pescatarian. I'd like to get away from eating mammals. I'd like to get away from eating chicken and turkey, and I'd like to be more into eating fish and shrimp. That doesn't make me less of a pescatarian, even though I'm pretty darn close. I'm still figuring it out. My point is that, you know, I've tried keto. It's not for me. It's not a very sustainable diet. My point is, some people like games on easy. Some people like games right in the middle. Some people like to play easy and see if it's too easy and then work their way up to figure it out. And that's all okay. It's okay for us to figure out where we lie. And for me personally, platformers are much more difficult than RPGs. That's another facet, another appendage off of this conversation, is that different styles of games are able to be endured or able to be conquered by different people differently. So I don't think it's fair, because there are some people who could kick the living snot out of a platformer, and they're wired for it, and that's great, and they might struggle with Skyrim or something.
Or like an FPS or something like that, you know?
Right. Or, you know, they might be good at platformers, but...
You know, like a car soccer game for people who really hate themselves.
Yeah. Or they might just be really great at platformers, but are bad at Smash, and then they have a bad relationship with playing Smash Ultimate or Melee or any of those things, and it's okay. We're all made to do different things, you know?
And I think that brings up an interesting topic of, you know, there are different kinds of difficulty. Ben and Vince, you guys mentioned Rocket League. And I know Ben and I play Rocket League. Vince, you're a big Smash Online player. These are games where, it's really easy to go up against bots and computers, turn it up the whole way. You're going to win no matter what if you have any, sense of the game. And you go hop online and suddenly it's a completely new kind of difficulty, that is to say PvP. I think that introduces a new element of difficulty, and not just that, it becomes mentally difficult as well. I can't speak for Smash because I tried very briefly to be competitive and realized that it was not for me. But Rocket League, and Ben, I think you'll agree with me here, a big part of playing online is not the difficulty of the mechanics, though they're there. It's the mental difficulty. It's this new added facet that's not there when you're just playing against bots.
So, would you care to elaborate slightly on that? Because I think I feel where you're going with difficulty in that particular game, but I would like a little bit of clarity. What do you...
Sure. The PvP difficulty for me, especially when you're playing competitively, just 1v1, whether it's 1v1 Rocket League, 1v1 Smash, 1v1 Street Fighter, there's an added... element of difficulty insofar as mental, it becomes a mental game, and that's just not present when you're playing against a bot or a computer.
No. To be honest, when I make exhibition games, and I'm not trying to sound like that guy right now, but the only way that I'm actually getting any level of entertainment is when I have the bots on unfair and do it 4-on-1, because they're predictable. There's not this element of... humans change. I mean, when you're playing against a human online, that's the mind game. That's okay, I'm going to anticipate what they're going to do next. I'm going to put myself in the right position and read where they're going, because you know what the bots are going to do every single time. Yeah,
and that adds that's a new facet of difficulty then, the playing against another human. And, we could get into the weeds too about, which is more fun, which I think is a fair question, to ask. But yeah, you're exactly right. And I think for that reason, those are two very different kinds of difficulty. For that reason, it's not good to practice Rocket League, as a player versus computers, or it's not good to lab in Smash against 3 level 9 computers, because bots do not have that inherent sense of control and unpredictableness, unpredictability. You ain't know what they're not gonna do. You never know what they're gonna do.
I'm looking at this from like a different side of the coin, based on somebody who does not play Rocket League and plays quite a bit of Melee and Ultimate. And I will say that the predictability of, and this is really only for fighting games, the predictability of people that play fighting games is what makes the fighting games difficult. So like predictability, obviously there's like a shadow, there's a light, and then the light casts a shadow, right? So the predictability is the light, and then the shadow would be like, what do they think they think they're gonna do, and then they're gonna schmix you, and you're gonna get schmixed.
Yep.
You know what I mean? So like the bot is not thinking those things. So I completely agree with that sentiment, because the bot is saying, I can wave land on this platform, I can do all these things, like, and then I'm just going to randomly air dodge and do a thing that a person would never do. In essence, that what that's doing in a PvP setting in terms of fighting games or Rocket League, things that we are very familiar with, that's actually going to make you worse as a player, because you're reacting to what that bot is doing, and that bot is just like not with it. That bot is not schmixing you. That bot's just being a bot. They're just programmed, to do XYZ thing because they know it's in the source code. Sometimes bots will flex on you, but it is random at best, and it is like it's also non-impressive to get flexed on by a bot, because bots don't miss input, bots don't mess up, and bots don't cave under pressure. You can't teabag on a bot. You can't make a bot like want to run home and cry to mommy. Like you can't make a bot rage quit in the chat. Like, yeah, those are like really the kind of things in terms of PvP video games and difficulty that make those games difficult. Yes, you have to know the mechanics.
Are you okay, Vince?
Wait, what?
Are you okay, Vince? Do you need to talk to somebody?
Dude, I play too much Ultimate Online, and like, I really will be schmixing on people, and then just be like, I will absolutely get shat on, like, the next game.
I love this. You're talking about, like, you're exactly right. Bots won't cave under pressure. But the thing that I love so much is that you'll get somebody into a corner in Rocket League or in Smash. I'm just going to use Rocket League. I've played so much Smash in my life, and I've been playing Rocket League more recently, so I'm going to use Rocket League. But, like, your team's down 4-1, and you're playing doubles, and there's 1 minute and 6 seconds left. Some people, bots never, but people like to be backed into that corner because while they feel like they're on their way out, or while it might seem that way, you're just lighting a fire under them. Bots in Rocket League are like, hit the ball toward the net. And in Smash Brothers, it's push this person off of the ring. And it's like, humans will fake you out. And exactly, it's that whole light and shadow. Like, they think that they know what you're going to do, and think about what they're doing. It's so heavy. And no, PvP is endlessly satisfying. I did a little too much of it on Call of Duty in college, to be honest.
Yeah, man. PvP games are like battle royale games, FPS games, any kind of like arena multiplayer game in all genres and all spaces are still some of the most popular games that people play, period. You know what I mean? Like, when the new Call of Duty releases, it doesn't have to be good. It just has to be named Call of Duty. And that's a testament to how much people love the genre. And how the game changes every single time you play it. And there is no way that you're going to have the same experience twice. Even when playing the same person.
Yeah. If I can just piggyback one more thought onto that. I don't want to interrupt. I was just going to say, I think that's why in middle school, high school, college, that, you have people that'll start playing games at 10 p.m. and aren't done until 4 in the morning, because it's different every time. Like, if you were just going up against bots, you'd quit after an hour.
So let's call this, like, I want to name the types of difficulties, and, like, could we call this, like, PvP difficulty? Like this was not, like, there is a certain level of designing from the game dev. Obviously, like, the game dev puts in all of the, let's say we're just talking about, I don't know, Smash. There's like 90-something characters. The game dev put in all the characters, right? So the characters all have certain frame data, move sets, weight, speed, all these things. But that's not what inherently makes the game difficult. It's how much you can schmix. Where are you moving? Where are you going? What are you going to do? Is this person going to call out your jump or not? Kind of thing. Like, those are the things that, so like, COD, is someone going to drop shot you? Is there a dude in that house? Like, I don't know. I don't play very much COD, but like, you get the basic idea. Like, that it's constantly changing, ever evolving, and that's like your PvP difficulty. What about games that are like single player, story driven experiences, a la Majora's Mask? Let's talk about Majora's Mask. You guys just covered Majora's Mask, right? Like, difficulty in that game is obviously difficult, different from like difficulty in Call of Duty, whereas like in a Zelda game, it's not going to tell you like exactly where to go or like exactly what to do, and you have to use a little bit more of the thinky brain. That's like thinky type of difficult. Like, it speaks in tongues and like all these things, and you have to figure out like what the little man in this costume is saying so that you can get the thing you need to get and open the door,
Yeah, and I don't think that we can, we don't have to just pigeonhole that to Zelda. Just to use another game, Vince, that I know you're playing, Disco Elysium, is very much the same way. It's this sort of difficulty within logic. I take issue with calling certain Zelda puzzles, but that's neither here nor there. It's this difficulty of, you have to figure stuff out, right? You have to figure out what checks you need to unlock and who you need to talk to in Disco Elysium to progress. In Zelda, you have to figure out what item to use where, or in what order to trigger these things. And nobody is just going to hand that to you. Versus something like Witcher or Elder Scrolls, where you get a quest marker, and you just go, right? It's a completely different kind of difficulty.
Right, and I think those games oftentimes can be based on your age and how familiar you are with like video game tropes. So like a couple tropes in let's just use Zelda as another example, I guess. Like, look for the brightly colored thing that you can hookshot, or look for the eyeball, shoot it with your arrow, or big key, big door. Ooh, there's a bunch of pots in this room and nothing else. Maybe I should break the pots. There's a platform on water. Maybe there's another platform that I can weigh down so that this platform will rise. Or maybe there's a way I can control the water level. Or like all of these different things are like Rick was saying, that did you call them logic?
Yeah, like difficulty based in logic and reasoning.
Yeah, like the difficulty based in logic can be, number one, it's bricked into the game. Like, it is soldered into that game. There's no changing that difficulty. There's no slider that's like, the enemies are X hard or Y hard. It's just like, okay, the water temple is always, always the water temple. It's always going to be the water temple. Whether you're 40 or 4, you're going to play the water temple. And I think that's an interesting dynamic in games that some devs have gotten right, and like some devs have really like not gotten right. And I think Nintendo is one of those devs that has gotten it right. If anybody's played Odyssey, like Super Mario Odyssey, I have not finished it, but that game is hard enough in places for the people that really want it to be hard, but easy enough to beat it. Easy enough to say, I finished Mario Odyssey.
And it's not just that it's, difficult sometimes and not difficult other times. Just like 64 and Sunshine and Galaxy 1 and 2, it's, you could go from A to B in the standard way and win, but it's set up in such a way that it gives you the freedom to challenge yourself to complete the level and complete the tasks in increasingly difficult ways, right? That's one thing that I really love about the Mario platforming games, is there's just endless creativity on how to complete the level. And you can do it the basic easy way, and that's okay. You're still going to get rewarded and feel satisfied. Or you could just go absolutely X Games mode and do what some of these speedrunners do,
Yep. It's the Super Mario 64 model, and that model has been tried and true for all the platformers. The same, like Bob-omb first world area, and doing it like 3, 4, or 5 times with different just like different enemies moved around, or like different platforms that are now revealed, and it makes it different and more challenging in just like a different way, I guess. I think Super Mario Sunshine did a really good job of combining logic with their puzzles too. I would love to cover Super Mario Sunshine at one point, but like I think they did a really, really good job with secrets. They did a really good job with the hidden shine sprites. You could go back and play that game. You could beat the game just going through, doing exactly what it tells you to do, get X amount of shine sprites in X amount of areas, bada bing, bada boom, get all the floods, you're good to go. Isle Delfino is saved. Hooray. Oh, woo, 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 woo. Oh,
I'm a chuckster.
For those of you that are confused, I was not just making a noise for the sake of...
He's okay.
I am okay.
He's medically okay.
Not drowning, nor am I having a panic attack. I am, in fact, just making the noise of the native people of Isle Delfino. Are they even people?
This is not a political podcast, Vince.
I forget what the people are called.
It's not politics, bro. They're big fucking elephant seal looking things and they go whoop 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 whoop. How is that?
I call them the uwus, but I don't think that's it.
No.
What are they?
No, editor, take it out.
Here's a question that I had that I wanted to ask. And this kind of fits into the different kinds of difficulties. So we've up until now mentioned games that we like, and games that we think handle things well. What are some modes of difficulty or ways that games have handled difficulty that you all don't like? Because I have a big one based on games that I play, thinking back to Skyrim in particularly, and Final Fantasy X in particularly, and the Final Fantasy series as a whole. But it's this notion that more difficult just equals more health, and then it becomes a battle of stamina with you, the human, and it does not get any more challenging as a gameplay. There is a hidden boss at the end of Final Fantasy X and I don't remember the name, but the health on the boss is like 12 billion. It's like something just stupidly absurd, and it's not challenging. You just have to be willing to sit there and play the game, that single fight, for an hour to beat it, right? Same thing with Elder Scrolls, like Skyrim. Whenever you crank the difficulty, the enemies deal more damage, and they have more health. But that doesn't inherently make the game any more challenging. The combat is still the same Skyrim combat. Love it or don't love it. It does not get more challenging. It's just a test of your patience, right? And I know different kinds of patience are different kinds of currency, and that currency spends a little differently. Like when a game asks me to just continually do something that I've already proven that I could do, just to do more of it, and says, yeah, this is hard, huh? Like my patience wears so thin. I have so little currency to devote to that. It's like that's my least favorite, and it happens a lot in games that I really love, like JRPGs and, WRPGs.
I had Borderlands is typing. So I think I had this issue with Borderlands a lot, especially Borderlands 2, which I love Borderlands 2. I think it's a great game. It's creative, lovely world. Great concept of like the looter shooter. And I think Borderlands was a really, really big one that made looter shooters super popular because it's a little bit more digestible than Fallout. Borderlands is like, go here, do this. Big gun, shiny plasma, shooty, and there's a little robot that says stupid things. People love that game. But as you get into like the high 30s, early 40s in terms of leveling, the bosses just become bullet sponges. And they do the same damage to you, and you get very little health in return based on the items that you pick up. And I think that's a huge flaw. It's like the bullet sponge idea, the same thing that you were talking about with Final Fantasy.
Yeah, it's a complete endurance test. I'm okay with, throw harder bosses at me, make me change up my play style. That's why, games like Dark Souls and Witcher, and to a lesser extent Horizon, are so good, is because they challenge you to play differently and use your brain and figure out the patterns of the bosses, versus just continually throwing you the same exact bosses and you just attack them the same exact way just for longer periods of time. Like, that's not respecting my time, and that's, not respecting my intelligence as a player. Anybody could do that.
Right. I'm not getting any younger, and I surely do not have so much free time to be spending doing all of these things. And the thing about playing a game like Dark Souls or like Sekiro or Demon Souls or Bloodborne is that all of these games give you a mechanic that will give you mechanics that you can use sometimes or not use other times that are helpful in defeating those harder bosses, like the parry mechanic. In Breath of the Wild 2 is a great example. The parry mechanic is awesome because you can parry to your heart's content. It's just balls hard. Not everyone and their brother is going to be able to just parry every single Lionel hit every single time in Breath of the Wild. Same thing in Dark Souls when you're fighting. Oh my god, what's the name? You guys don't know. You haven't played Dark Souls. Have you?
It is on my list. I have Dark Souls 3 downloaded and ready to go. I just haven't taken the plunge yet.
You have to play 1 first.
I've heard different opinions from different people, but I do own 2 and 3.
Homie. We're going to play 1. We're going to do it. Okay, anyway.
Yeah.
I digress. Also, I'm not going to yuck your yum on that. I'm not going to gatekeep Dark Souls for you. I think you can do it whatever order you want to, but it's my suggestion. You play 1.
If the remastered comes down in price, I will absolutely buy it.
Okay, that's actually a really good point. It is still quite expensive. There's a boss in Dark Souls, big fat boy, and then there's a little skinny boy. It's Dragon Slayer, Ornstein, and Maug or Smaug or something like that. No, Smaug is the name of the dragon from The Hobbit. Never mind. But anyway, Dragon Slayer, Ornstein, and then other guy, and they are this duo of bosses, and you can parry some of their hits. You can't parry all of their hits, but they're not impossible to beat, and they don't have crazy health that makes them impossible to beat, but they deal damage commensurate to the damage that you deal to them. So it makes it very a very back and forth kind of thing where depending on how you can play the game, you can use whatever equipment you want to, you can use whatever setup you want to use. Some setups are going to be more difficult, but it's still beatable. Whereas if you're playing a Borderlands or a Final Fantasy, like an RPG or a looter shooter style, or even like a roguelike, we haven't talked about roguelikes yet. I guess, never mind, not roguelikes. Roguelikes are not a good game to use in this example, but like there are mechanics in the games based on how skilled of a player that you are that will allow you to beat these difficult bosses. And I think that's integral to making a game super difficult without giving the player the tools to compensate for that difficulty, and just telling them to play the game using the same formulaic thing over and over and over again. Dodge and then shoot, dodge, shoot, dodge, shoot, or dodge, magic. And then you start camping, and then the game is no longer any fun.
Ben, I feel like Vince and I have talked at length here. What are some like tropes and difficulties, or utilizations of difficulty in games that really don't resonate with you?
Thank you for restating, because I actually did not remember the initial question from approximately 10 minutes ago. Tropes that I don't appreciate in difficulty. I've been kind of thinking about the things that grind my gears. Things I don't like, so like GoldenEye or like Bond games. Not that I play a profuse amount of them, but you do Agent. What is it? Agent, Secret Agent, and 007 Agent, or whatever it's called in GoldenEye. It's like you go through the first time you're a regular agent, and it's fine. It's like, okay, yeah, well, people are going down in the right number of shots, and it takes, for whatever reason, 5 gallons of lead to be within my body before anything's going to happen to me. Whenever we get to Secret Agent, suddenly it's starting to turn, like how easily you die versus how easily the enemies die. And then whenever it's 007, it's like they're impossible to kill and you're going down instantly. And that sort of thing is frustrating to me. Just the way that, I don't know, if it's an FPS, I mean, it shouldn't be overly complicated. I don't think it should take gallons of bullets to take anyone out, not to sound like that guy.
So that's like it's like, okay, if you think of, no one can see my hands at home, we are not a video podcast, I'm holding my hands equally level with each other. I move one hand down and then the other hand goes up, kind of like a two-sided scale, right? So like the more damage they do to you, the less damage you do to them, and then vice versa. So the more damage you do to them, the less damage they do to you. Whereas what if those two things just moved up and down commensurate with each other, instead of just having this like weird inverse scale with each other?
Yeah. Yeah. And like improve the enemy's accuracy as they get harder. That's fine. Like I'm not gonna, because then that you have to work on evasion a little bit more. But when it comes to that kind of stuff frustrates me. And I've played a lot of old school Star Wars Rogue Squadron, and something that was particularly frustrating was, yes, you have to have 35% accuracy, take out 60 enemies, and you have to do it all in 2 minutes while completing the mission at hand. And it's like, okay, I get it, and I love difficulty in games, and I love the option of being hard. But there comes a point where I don't know if I'm having fun trying to accomplish gold on this mission anymore. Which is that's I mean, Rick, you were talking about that from the beginning. That's kind of a risk we run with difficulty in games, is that like, at what point are we just not having fun anymore?
So I think that's a great segue into like a topic that I really wanted to talk about when we kind of proposed this, was that like, what games are we not playing, or specifically playing because of how easy or hard they are? So, everyone knows the original Super Mario Brothers. It's been remastered and released, and it can be emulated. Like, you can emulate it on your cell phone, for Christ's sakes. You know what I mean? Like, it's okay, and everyone knows that game, and the music is identifiable, the level design, all that stuff. But like, I can't tell you how many people that have probably gotten past like World 3, Well, most like more casual gamers, I would say. I have never gotten past probably World 3. I don't even know. I don't even care. You know? Come at me for it. It's fine. But the point I'm making is that there are games that can derive nostalgia. There are games that people can still be attached to, even though they're pretty hard. Do you guys have games that make you think of that exact thing that you still feel fond towards, but the difficulty level is still a little above your range? Or maybe a game you played as a kid that you came back to and you were like, oh, this is way easier now?
I think for me, I haven't really thought of this one before, but you had mentioned coming back to games and then realizing, oh, these are actually quite easy. Ben, I'm curious if you feel the same way about this, but I feel this way about a lot of the Pokemon games. Like, growing up, I remember thinking a lot of them were, like, quite difficult, and then replaying them as an adult, I'm like, no, like, we were just dumb kids. like I don't think there is a single Pokemon game that I've ever played that is actually difficult. It's just, it's marketed towards children, and kids are dumb. And I was dumb, so it was hard to me back then. But I still enjoy playing them. I don't often play them to completion anymore, but they feel very comfy to me. I mean, I don't know that I have that sense of nostalgia or like comfort gaming for any games that are absurdly difficult. But Pokemon for sure.
I agree with the Pokemon statement.
Oh, I forgot that you play Pokemon. Sorry, Ben.
No, it's all good. I think with Pokemon, I think it's a little. I don't want to say dumb kids necessarily, but I will say that there's this sense of it's kind of like hitting your gas with your right foot and your brake with your left foot is kind of what it's like playing Pokemon as a small person, because it's like I'm gonna go full speed, and meanwhile I'm not gonna think about strategy at all. So I'm just going to use Thunderbolt over and over. I'm out of Thunderbolt. I only have 10 health left, and I'm fighting a Geodude. Like, what do you...
Oh, this move doesn't deal damage? No, thank you.
Yeah, right. Flash?
Right.
Who needs it? They're only the most accurate Pokemon to fight in the whole game.
I know Thunder, Thunderbolt, Slam, and Bite, and that's it. No, thank you. Get those tail whips out of my sight.
Leer, what's he gonna do? Look at me funny? Like,
and meanwhile, yeah.
Meanwhile, Leer is a huge part of the competitive scene, or stat boosting moves are like a huge part of the competitive scene, and you will oftentimes find people where their Pokemon will only know like one offensive or two offensive moves, and the other two will be just stat adjusting moves.
Yep.
My least favorite thing as an adult with Pokemon is getting into like a Leer battle or like a Growl battle, or like where you keep going back and forth with the opponent and then you miss one and then you're like, son of a bitch, and then you're suddenly like way underpowered, or like, you know what I mean? That's the worst. And as a kid, I didn't care. I would just keep spamming Thunderbolt.
Right. And
I didn't know what it even did. And that's a really great testament to how much a game can grow with you over time, which I think is a great thing to talk about in terms of Pokemon. But it's also just a testament to how poorly they explained all that shit. Like, it was like, oh, it's defense fell. There were like dudes that you could find in the overworld that you could talk to in like the 6th city that you got into, where you talk to some random old man inside his house and he'd be like, oh, don't forget, your Pokemon can use defense and attack boosting moves like Leer and Growl and Swords Dance and Tail Whip. And that can like do all these things. And you're like, thanks for telling me, old man. Except I'm 7 and I'm not fucking reading that. So, I'm going to teach my my normal attack dominant Pokemon Flamethrower, because Flamethrower is cool as hell. And I need everyone to know Flamethrower right now.
Meanwhile, Graveler is using Harden over and over and over and over again, and you're out of Flamethrowers, and Graveler's just staring at you. That's what I mean by gas and break at the same time. So as kids, it's awesome, but it's also like, oh my gosh, had I had a sense of strategy, it would have been different. To answer a game that was hard as hell for me as a child that I went back to that wasn't Pokemon, it was Diddy Kong Racing. Let me tell you, that game, first of all, Mario Kart 64, I love you, but eat your heart out. Diddy Kong Racing was absolutely difficult, and there was a lot of strategy that went into that game because if you hit the same color balloon multiple times in a row, it boosted the attack of what you had. So if you hit a red balloon, you get a little rocket. And as a kid, you're going, I'm going to shoot this rocket at someone. But if you hit 2 red balloons, you get a heat-seeking missile. And if you hit 3 red balloons, you get 10 rockets. Didn't have the patience to wait for that usually. But I beat the game as an adult when I was a security guard for gas wells in southwestern Pennsylvania. I brought the Nintendo 64 with me. And when I wasn't letting trucks onto the site, I was sitting there trying to beat WizPig. That
Fucking
game was
WizPig.
really... He's a monster. I mean, literally and figuratively. But all that to say, I didn't beat this game as a child. And so I went back and I was strategic. And I'm not going to lie, I played it as many hours as I did as a child because it turns out that game is actually difficult. But yeah, it was rewarding to go back as an adult. I will say that.
So in terms of games that are rewarding to come back to as adults, I remember that I said that we was gonna talk about Nintendo games because I think Nintendo games do a lot of things well in terms of difficulty and in terms of not being able to change the difficulty. And we did touch on that a little bit with the Mario platformers, but Nintendo has made a plethora of other games that I would love to talk about in terms of difficulty. So, I'm going to ask this question, and I don't even know the answer because I haven't actually thought about this. What is the most difficult Nintendo game either of you ever played?
May I ask a clarifying question while we ponder? Which
Absolutely.
is, do you mean all Nintendo systems ever?
Yeah.
Okay. The Wii bowling trainer, where you're doing power throws, and you have to hit all of the pins. I've still never gotten all 91 in one.
Wii Fit in general, every time I play that game, they're like, you're doing the opposite of what you need to be doing, fatso. Then I'm like, oh, this game is hard. But to answer your question sincerely, and not just self-degrade myself publicly for all of our podcast listeners, I genuinely have not played a difficult Nintendo game that was honestly difficult probably since the Super Nintendo era, with things like Donkey Kong Country, the original one. I mean, that had some serious difficulty spikes, particularly like with the ending fight with K. Rool. And was Castlevania Symphony of the Night, was that Super Nintendo? Because that game's challenging.
I thought so.
I think it is. It's been very long, and, at this point it's, been put onto different platforms. But, those Metroidvania games like Super Metroid and Castlevania, that's where they got the name, those had some difficult moments. I think old school Nintendo was, they weren't afraid to be a little difficult. I don't feel like modern Nintendo does that. They don't take the risks that they used to.
No. Ben, please go.
I was just gonna say, I think I've played a lot of difficult Nintendo games, and I've played a lot of games on Nintendo that I haven't beaten, which is to say they were challenging. If I went back through my entire N64 library, I'm sure I'd have a few games to beat that I hadn't because they were too difficult at the time, which is to say Diddy Kong Racing, and even some of the first Professor Layton game, I hadn't beaten that, so I can't say that it's easy. But I think, and Rick, I think you'll agree with me, and Vince, I think you'll agree with me too, where Nintendo has come up short in their games, because I think their storytelling is brilliant. I think their mechanics make the game a nice balance, a nice little column A, little column B with their mechanics in terms of what all a character can do, and how like Mario's a little floating jelly bean who sometimes just doesn't land where you want him to, and then the damn camera angle kills you. Sorry. I had like a flashback. The problem with Nintendo, and again I think you'll both agree, is the difficulty would be so much greater and so much more appropriate if their conclusions and their final bosses put up a more worthwhile fight. Because end of Majora's Mask, pretty difficult. End of Ocarina of Time, I'm not going to lie, that's a pretty difficult battle. But in the grand scheme of things, I mean, the race with Whizpig was tough. Not that I meant to say Whizpig's name 3 times. I know. I didn't think I'd be saying his name that much. I feel like a monster, but yeah, no. It's their final bosses or their boss fights sometimes just fall short.
Yeah, I think after Nintendo became the family video game company, right around the Nintendo Wii era, because the GameCube had some pretty hard games. Thousand Year Door was pretty tough, in terms of like a JRPG. Thousand Year Door is still one of the greatest JRPGs of all time. Gonna leave that one there. I think that game is incredible. It is so good. It is one of the best JRPGs I've ever played. Anyway, that game was fairly difficult in terms of like the logic puzzles. Where do I go? What do I do? Where do I go? What do I do is a huge difficulty thing, and I really love to talk about that as well. But like, also in terms of like enemies and like boss battles and other things, the newest Paper Mario was so boring to me. Just to play through the whole thing, I didn't even finish it. I don't want to. It just seems like everything has a lot of health, and the boss battles are weird, and the mechanics are cool. It just doesn't seem like they kind of grasped like the really grassroots like Paper Mario mechanics that they were going for, and that's pretty much across all of their games. I think, all of the modern Switch games that I have played. Odyssey struck a nice balance. I did not think Breath of the Wild was difficult enough in the late stage game. The scaling of difficulty was cool with the bokoblins that like change color as you go through, and then you unlock a certain amount of areas in the map, and then you get more bokoblins, and then so on and so forth. But Ganon is underwhelming. Calamity Ganon is underwhelming at best. Spoiler alert for anyone who has not played Breath of the Wild, which you need to play Breath of the Wild. But I agree with Rick wholeheartedly when like the older Metroid games, Castlevania, the SNES, NES games, those were pretty darn difficult. Some of the original Game Boy Advance games were pretty darn difficult, for no other reason than the fact that like they were meant to be played all the way through, and these games were meant to be played like over a long amount of time too. So think about that, like these were the only real source of entertainment that people really had. So if you were going to invest time into this game, it would be many dozens of hours into like a one-shot game where you start from the beginning and see how far you can get every single time, every day, over the course of months and months and months. Eventually you're going to get there if you have enough time to spend on this one game. And I think the way that we view the games now is that there's so many games out there, so many games to be played, so many games we can finish, that we're not really going to delve into those more difficult games anymore. Maybe. This is just a theory, because there's just so much to do.
No, yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. There's, like you said, there's a lot out there to play, and we get paralysis analysis, even picking games at this point. But, it's super easy these days to, put a game down if it's too difficult and just move on to something else. Because these damn millennials, we don't have the gumption and the honor to go through a game when it's bad. But like, there's something to be said about that. Like, if a game can't balance itself in such a way that compels one to complete it, then, either let the player choose the difficulty, or, maybe fix that on your next game. It's like, I think I said this at the beginning of the podcast, like, if it comes down to it, it's either I will stop playing this game, or I will change the difficulty if I need to. I kept mentioning Skyrim just because, that's something that's just constantly in the zeitgeist. But thinking back to Skyrim, there's a point at the very beginning when you're going up to the Greybeards on the mountain. And it's soon enough in the game that you're probably, unless you're an experienced player, not going to have like trailed off and done tons of side quests. And going up to that mountain, there is a frost troll that I have never once not turned the difficulty down on, because it's just such an absurd spike at that point in the game. And like, again, Skyrim is not what I would consider difficult. It's just a test of endurance and patience. But at the same time, like, yeah, if it's between not changing the difficulty and not playing the game, playing something else, I'm going to play something else. Like just let me turn the difficulty down to get past this one goddamn thing. And I feel that way about a lot of games. Like, I don't think I ever did that in Witcher, Vince. I will say that. I never turned the difficulty down. But I wasn't opposed to it. You know what I mean? So I think you're right. There's so much out there to play. If a game isn't balanced in such a way and doesn't give you the opportunity or option to change the difficulty, or it doesn't, do it in some ways for you, like Dark Souls does, then, I don't think there's any honor to be lost in, putting it down for a while and trying something else.
Right. Or if they're going to give you that glimmer of hope, they're going to give you that mindset that you're actually chipping away at this level, or you're actually chipping away at this boss, or you're learning that one mechanic that you really need to beat this one level, that one wall jumping thing that you need to get past this one spot, then that's satisfying to the player. But if you're just running in every time, dying, or like running in every time you run out of this certain item, or you run out of health in a certain area because of like some weird poison level or some shit like that, like, that can be extremely frustrating. And I think that devs do a really good job of playtesting their games nowadays to kind of eliminate those possibilities. But a lot of older games were pretty ruthless in that sense. And a lot of older games would kind of just like fucking throw it at you and throw you out to the wolves and hang you out to dry, really, without really any hope at all of even getting past the first or second level. And me in 1989, if I were to buy a game for X amount of $1989 and it turned out to be way too freaking hard, I'd be pissed. I'd be really pissed because I just spent this money on this one game, one of 20 games that probably come out this whole year or something like that, like less than that even, 5, 10, I don't know, ballpark. But like, we don't look at video games the same way as a culture now. We look at them in terms of like, I bought this product, I want to be able to finish it from beginning to end.
And I think that that's both good and bad. I think that there should be adjustable levels to that end. Because don't get me wrong, I love Banjo-Kazooie and Banjo-Tooie, which, like, would you like a bone? Ooh. We'll go to the store and buy it yourself because we're going to kick your ass. And it did. They were admittedly satisfying, difficult games, but we can't turn games into a, like, well, my child is X amount of years old. They give them an A, please. No, right. Sorry, they earned no. You know what I mean? Like, we need to. But then, okay, so take college prep. You know what I mean? Don't take advanced. Take like regular. I don't. And that's okay. If I can talk about one thing that does, I want to touch on one more thing that you said that I rather liked, is that I do like the system of, okay, you learn a specific skill and you fight this boss and they teach you how to use it. That I think that's always a good thing. One thing that actually does piss me off in the video game difficulty conversation, and not to go off on a tangent or make this a new topic, but this is one of the things I was thinking about earlier. The whole notion of, like, whenever you're fighting a boss or whenever you're playing against a team of bots in a soccer or hockey, whatever, and you're losing by a certain point and they start taking it easy on you, that drives me a little bit nuts. I don't know if
where
you guys
has
have
that specifically happened to you? I don't think that I've ever, like, explicitly noticed that happen to me ever.
It's happened to me in NHL 99 at least, where I'm
that classic title.
Yeah, bro. I mean, you lost me there. I don't think I've ever bought or owned a sports game in my entire life.
Oh, this wasn't for me. It was for my brother, but I logged many more hours on it than he ever did. But it's one of those things where, like, for whatever reason, the Flyers were up, 4-0 against the Penguins. And next thing you know, they're up 4-0, and then they're just passing the puck to each other. No one shoot. Like, they stopped playing. And it's like, why did you go easy on me? Why did this happen? I don't know. That has happened to me in more than one game, and it drives me up a wall.
It's funny you should mention that, because I noticed that playing Majora's Mask is that particularly in things that involve, like, movement, like that one boss that sped around the ring when you're the Goron. I cannot remember his name for the life of me. But, you know, if he goes too far ahead, he kind of just slows down or stops and waits for you to catch up. But outside of that, like, I can't think of anything that does that kind of goes easier on you the more you are losing.
It hasn't happened to me often, but it has happened to me in a couple of games. I can't remember all of them, but I know it's happened to me in a few. And I don't even know what it's called, but I know I've experienced it. And I know it's made me upset.
We're not calling you a liar. We believe you.
Oh, I might be a liar if my memory is serving me incorrectly. That or the Flyers really just like to practice against the Penguins. They like to practice their passing in NHL 99.
So we have pretty much touched on a lot of different genres of games and the way that they're difficult, different companies that have made games difficult specifically. We talked about Halo, we talked about a lot of Nintendo games, we talked about games in terms of like when they're made and how difficult they're made based on the time that they were made in. And I think that's really great to incorporate context into there. But like, let's talk about games that are attractive for their difficulty, that do it well, and that like are really designed to be played over a long period of time, and replayability is neither monotonous nor is it frustrating. I mean, obviously games can be frustrating depending on the mindset of the player, and like, you know, like, oh, I really am so close and then I die. Like, yes, that can be frustrating. But like, speaking in terms of games like from all of the From Software games, the Souls games, or specifically the games that I play a lot of roguelikes. So thinking like Hades, Faster Than Light, Binding of Isaac, Enter the Gungeon, and Into the Breach is a great puzzle roguelike game. These games are all designed in terms of difficulty where you're meant to die, like all the time. And you learn something as you go through one playthrough, and then you die, and then you go back, and then you go through another playthrough, and then you die, and you go back. And you just keep doing that over and over and over again, and not one playthrough is ever different. And these games do not have adjustable difficulty. Actually, that's not true. Binding of Isaac, no. Faster Than Light does have adjustable difficulty, I think. No, it doesn't. Never mind. None of them do. But what do you guys think about games like that? Have you ever had any experience with these kind of games?
Yeah, I have a great one, partially because I'm playing it right now. Divinity Original Sin 2, I think, is a great example of this. And I think the reason that it's so attractive is because, although it's difficult, it's a game that says yes. And what I mean by that is, essentially, if you can think of something to do in this game, you can do it, right? Like, and it's a game where combat is not only just pivotal to the lore and to the story and to the actual game experience, like you're doing a lot of it, but it's also a game where levels are super important. So like, you cannot take somebody on that's one level or two levels ahead of you and expect it to be easy, but there are other things you can do. You can sneak up on them and plant poison in their pocket. You can try to talk past them. You can try and recruit nearby animals. You know, you can cover the entire field in oil and then set all of the oil on fire, which is pretty much what happens in every Divinity fight. If it's not on fire, you're not playing the game right. But you know, that's why I think the difficulty in that game works. It's very hard, but it gives you plenty of opportunity to do things your way. And just to be clear, it also has a difficulty slider. Like, you can choose easy mode, you can choose super hard mode. But even playing on the quote-unquote normal difficulty, it's still pretty damn hard. But it gives you so many options as to how to approach it, you know, versus something like, I don't even know if this is a good example, like Halo 1 on the hardest difficulty. Suddenly certain weapons become just totally obsolete, and you have less choices than before. You kind of have to go with the plasma pistol or things like that. But that was the first one that jumped into my mind. I know Dark Souls are very good about, you know, minorly tweaking and lessening the difficulty based on your player experience, what with summons from what I've heard. But I wasn't going to speak on that because, again, I have yet to play it, but I will play it.
Can you please, I was just going to say, I would love to answer the question, but can you, I mean, if we have to cut this and make this a break, can you please rephrase the question to me just because I want to make sure I'm understanding exactly what it is I'm supposed to be answering.
Right, yeah. I don't think we need to cut any of that, actually. I think that's we could just keep it all in here.
All right, that's fine.
Yeah, more of a casual conversation. I think... What was the question? Oh, are there any games that you play because they are difficult enough to be challenging, where it's satisfying to beat that level or boss or enemy, and that strike that nice balance, you think, in terms of overarching difficulty? Let's say games with or without some kind of difficulty slider. Is there a game that you feel like it really strikes that happy balance where the difficulty is an integral part of the game, but does not make nor break the game?
Two games. One of them is the obvious for me, and that's Breath of the Wild, because there are 100 different ways to play that game. If you want to use stasis to end up trying to kill enemies, or magnesis, or if you want to stealth a camp in the middle of the night, you can do that. And I love those options because those get really difficult, especially in hero mode.
Agreed.
The other game, and Rick, I think it was your suggestion, was one of the games I was playing for Scary Games in October was Resident Evil. No, it wasn't yours. Somebody recommended I play Resident Evil, and I hated it. But I can't stop playing it. Like, it's one of those things where I went, good God, why am I doing this? And then I realized, oh, there are only 3 bullets you can acquire in the entire game. And you can only save the game so many times. And I'm sitting here like, so the game is actually, in Video Game Donkey actually touched on this in a video just a few days ago. And you're just supposed to avoid the zombies and kill them in emergency situations. So it's like, that's been really satisfying to me because it's one of those things where I get frustrated and go, this is stupid. But then like, Therapist Ben comes out and goes, is it stupid or is it just new and different, Ben? I'm like, it's just new and different, Ben. And then
Therapist Ben doesn't ever need to come back. We can put Therapist Ben back. I don't need that reality check in my life ever.
No, Therapist Ben was right about that one. I'm not going to lie. And otherwise, I never would have played Resident Evil again. But instead, I pressed on. And
I'm not upset because Therapist Ben was wrong, Ben. Oh. I'm upset because Therapist Ben was right.
I'm going to send Therapist Ben away.
Far. Go sit in your armchair and think about what you've done.
Nice. Yeah. So Resident Evil is one of those for me. What about you? What do you long for?
Oh, me? Mm-hmm. Okay.
So you asked it.
You listed a bunch of like From Software and roguelikes, Vince, whenever you phrased the question.
So in terms of games that I mentioned the From Software games and I mentioned the roguelikes, but there are games that I think do strike that nice balance between being like really difficult and that I love to play. Rick, you mentioned before playing the Halo games on Legendary. I loved doing that. Sometimes it was tedious, and sometimes it was frustrating, but over time, it was really nice to be able to beat levels. I love Doom Eternal. I think all the Doom games are really like some of my favorites, but Doom Eternal specifically has some really, really great gameplay in terms of scaling for difficulty. When I die in that game, most of the time I really don't feel like I died for an unfair reason. The mechanics are great and the comeback mechanics are fair and balanced, I believe. There are stealth games that I play. I've played a couple of my favorite stealth games, Hitman and Dishonored. Dishonored is probably one of the more favorite games that I've played in terms of stealth. Those games, if you're playing on the easier difficulty, oftentimes like the enemies, you'll be just like walking down the hallway toward them and they'll just be like, oh, what? I hear a sound and I don't know where the sound's coming from. But on the harder difficulties, you could be like on a rafter a mile away and then you'll hear like an enemy alert sound. And I think those games sometimes do get a little unfair, but most of the time strike a nice balance. Difficult enough so that you really feel like you need to be stealthy all the time, versus being totally completely unfair and like basically invalidating you as a person and telling you that you suck. Balance
is everything in any walk of life. No, but honestly, I don't want to beat, to any. I don't want to jump to any conclusions, but like, or rather, what's the word? I don't want to foreshadow too aggressively here, so I just want to touch on it. But Spyro is one of those games.
You could say that we're covering Spyro. We've already announced it on the channel.
I know, but I just don't want to like talk too much about it.
Tell your friends, if you haven't already, if you were listening to this podcast right now and you would like to hit us up on Instagram at pixelprojectradio, you can do that. We do not have a Twitter, but we should probably make a Twitter because Twitter's fun.
We do have a Twitter.
We have a Twitter. We have a Twitter.
Yes, we do.
Also, it's also a great time to plug our email. If you'd like to get a hold of us, maybe topics, games you'd like to see covered, like all those things, please email us at pixelprojectradio@gmail.com. Eventually, we'll have our own domain, but we are neither rich enough nor are we resourceful enough to have that yet. So we're using the good old Gmail, the tried and true.
The 100th person to follow us on Instagram will have one of us show up to your house to give you a kiss on the forehead. So.
With a smile.
Yeah.
Unless it's that fucking whiz pig.
And some cookies.
I'll make the cookies. I will. If you're the 100th person.
What kind of cookies will you
I have this recipe called Ben Cookies. It's a long story, but I'll spare you. I was going to talk about Spyro. So before I lose the thought to eternity, that's been a game. Playing through the first Spyro over again has been really rewarding, but it's a nice grade. Like, it's at the beginning, the enemies are like basically running from you, but by the end, it's a satisfying level of difficulty. I kind of like the pushback. So
that's interesting. I don't really see it the same way. I mean, I think it's a very easy game, but it's not a detriment to its enjoyment. Like, it's a very enjoyable game to play, but like, I'm not gonna die while playing it because it's not that kind of game, and I think we could talk about that at length once we actually do the episode, but that's one of the strengths of that game is just how much it does well as a remaster. That, like, yeah, it's easy, but it was also made for kids when we were kids, so that's okay. And it's just a very relaxing experience. Like, I'm not gonna put it down because it's too easy.
No, and I'm not saying it's difficult per se. I'm just saying at the beginning when you have enemies that run from you, and then they finally push back later on. I'm satisfied by that. But ultimately, yeah, no, it is very much like striking a match around a lot of really dry old newspaper. Like, you just kind of blaze right through it.
I think there's something to be said about games like that, though. Like, in terms of Spyro, like, I don't think anyone's ever called a Spyro game bad because it was too easy in terms of the combat. There's also platforming in Spyro, and there's like level design. You have to kind of like navigate your way around. I'm not the biggest Spyro guy, but I know those things exist. There's like multifaceted layers that can make the game difficult or not. And also, like Rick was saying, like, there's no harm in just coming into a game and looking at it for what it is. Like, if you're going to try to put a round peg in a square hole, and you want Spyro to be the most difficult thing you've ever played, then you either need to make your own Spyro. You just need to learn how to code and be a game dev and make your own Spyro. Or you don't play Spyro. And there's other games that can scratch that itch for you.
Yeah, I think some of the difficulty in Spyro, at least the most difficulty that I've seen, does come from a couple of, kind of challenging jumps and terrain that you have to get around. But yeah, I mean, like you said, it's just not that kind of game. That's okay. A couple of other things with difficulty that I just wanted to check off really quick because I don't think they demand a ton of conversation. Immediate nope from me, and a great way to get me to really lose respect for your studio is making fun of the player for choosing a certain difficulty. Like, we're fucking done if you do that. Like the Wolfenstein, wow, I want my bottle difficulty, the chicken hat in Metal Gear 5, games that just kind of berate you for playing on a lower difficulty. Like, get out of my face with that. I don't want anything to do with that.
I didn't even know Wolfenstein or Metal Gear Solid 5 did that.
Yeah, the wow I want my bottle difficulty is just the name of the easy difficulty. I haven't personally played Metal Gear 5, but I think it just gives you a chicken hat if you play on the easiest difficulty, because I don't even know what their justification behind it would be. But yeah, I'm super not into that. But that goes back to our first topic of just, liking what you like.
Right. And I shame on the game devs for... I know that's funny and it's in jest, but there might be some people that are playing Wolfenstein that it's like, let's say it's a mom with 3 kids and she only gets an hour at night to play the game and she wants to get through it. And, she's not going to try to play on the balls to the wall difficulty because she wants to finish the game sometime this century. Because, it's 8 p.m., you put the kids to bed, and you're tired, and you don't want to necessarily tax yourself by playing this shooter at the hardest, setting.
Or let's say that, you're somebody with mobility issues or are otherwise disabled. Like, are you really going to punish them for not having insane 15-year-old reaction time and being able to input all these button mappings? Like, no. Like... You have to cater. I mean, that gets tricky too. Catering to a select few or catering to everybody, that's a completely different issue. But, again, it goes back to just let people enjoy the art how they want to enjoy it. No shame in listening to a full performance of the Goldberg Variations on an iPhone. No shame in watching The Irishman on an iPad. It's fine.
Right.
It's fine.
It's absolutely fine.
Yeah.
The disabled person conversation. I am not a disabled person, nor are any of us, because none of you know what we look like except for pictures of us. The disabled person conversation is not something I can speak to personally, but it's something that we should keep in mind as people who play something that requires it requires extreme dexterity, and whether keyboard or controller, and being able to accommodate. There are many peripherals that can accommodate for people of many different disabilities, but game devs can definitely be more helpful with that, and just no one gives a shit if your easy mode is called easy or if it's called stroller in the park, or like wham wah goo goo gaga give me my bottle, or some stupid shit like that. Like, nobody cares what you name your easy mode. It's just the name of your easy mode. Just name it easy. I should rephrase that. It matters in the sense that you could have just as easily called it easy as you could have called it whatever gobbledygook that you called it. That is just offensive for the sake of being offensive, and not really that funny.
It is, and the developers need to keep in mind that they are lessening themselves when they do things like that by choosing to turn a blind eye towards empathy for the single mom who has an hour to play with her kids every night by, you're berating the mother and the children by that measure, and, that's not right. And Rick, I actually was thinking about exactly what you mentioned earlier, and it's like, I've had some concussions in my life now. Thankfully, they haven't done anything that have affected me cognitively or in terms of my coordination or anything. But who's to say somebody out there can't handle a game at exactly at that pace that they want to? Or you're going to make them feel worse? Like that's kind of like one of those people could have served our country. One of those people could have been a major athlete, and suddenly we're going to lessen them by calling something that No, I'm not interested.
This is kind of peripheral to the conversation, Ben, but I will say I actually was just yesterday watching a YouTube video of this Rocket League player that recently got into the top. It's definitely 100. It might be even farther up. But he actually doesn't have use of one of his arms. Like, he was born without an arm, and he tucks the controller under his chin and doesn't control movement, but controls all of the face buttons with his chin. I'm not praising Rocket League for being accessible, but seeing stuff like that, I was like, man, this kid is so fucking cool.
And good. That is good for them if he's able to do that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Did they make that possible for him through the controller?
No, it's just a standard Xbox controller. He tucks it under, and he found a way.
That
kid
really
is so cool.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So yeah, I think, we've talked at length about some things that we appreciate, some things that are maybe detrimental in our opinion, and I think we've about conquered it, right? I think we've said everything in the world possible about difficulty in games, huh, boys?
This is the finite discussion on difficulty in games, and I think you should send this to your friends and tell them exactly that. And you can quote me, and if they disagree, then they're wrong.
Yeah,
But
I can't
do
wait for the
not
next one.
send it to WizPig.
Don't send it to WizPig, please.
This is
But
an
no.
anti-WizPig zone.
Well, but that's not to say that we discriminate against pigs of the whiz variety.
That's actually to say we do discriminate against
Oh,
pigs
no.
of the whiz variety.
Oh no. No, there's such a conversation that we can continue to have about difficulty, especially as difficulty evolves. And maybe there's something that you'd like to hear us touch on. You can email us at pixelprojectradio@gmail.com, or you can follow us, message us on our Instagram.
And Twitter.
By the same time. And Twitter, but you can find us
And
there.
Twitter.
If you'd like to hear us talk about different difficulties, we're here for it. So argue us, let us know. We're here for it.
Yeah, absolutely. Shoot us a message, and until next time, I guess we'll see you when we see you.
Thanks everybody for listening.